And see how sometimes it goes out? The light goes out, but it's still on. So, you know. Check, check, check. 1, 2.
Hey, Rich. I know. I know. Hello, sir. I was watching you on YouTube last night. I didn't have to be here, but I was watching because I got to stay abreast of everything that's going on. But maybe at some point we can talk and I can give you some background on that because we're always meeting District 29 almost every day, trying to figure out the way that we can get everybody back here. And we're busting around trying to come up with stuff, but limitations on what we can do too. I met with my boss and director Pastrella yesterday morning for 2 hours, trying to figure out a way because we need to bring you guys a package so you can understand what we're thinking because you have to approve it. It's not on us. Yeah, we put a kicker in the local coastal plants you heard last night about these fire tanks, and honestly, there's nothing temporary about any of it. Let's say Berlin, I don't know when Pastrell's going to get around to putting the pipes in. Yeah, and that's on them, but they need money. He's on the governor's help. He's going to give you money for infrastructure. So he's convinced. I just don't know how much and how much is going to go to which fire. Well, it could be his intention on putting this money out. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I don't like the alternative.
Do I have time to use the restroom real quick?
Short time window again. Same phone text.
Let me see your eyes. Last night
I barely had any. I started short circuiting out here. I'm so tired.
Spark plugs a car. I was worried about you.
Do you want to start introductions or over there? Oh, they have a microphone.
Playing all the best songs ever.
the city. Well, I'd be great. Oh, I'd be more than glad to talk to him. Part of it. I can't hold a job.
Yeah, we're flying out. We're flying out next Wednesday. We're going to go to the jazz festival.
Oh, wonderful.
It has been how many years? It's been 45 years since I've been to it. And my husband has never been, so he really wants to go.
Yolanda wants you to bring your bar in the park.
Oh, absolutely. Have some beignets.
And I'm thinking,
Oh,
that's a vignette?
that is. It's a beignet. It's a French donut. Go have some. Here's Palace if we can get and go try some photos.
Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to go ahead and get started for our Beach Communities Part 2. So those of you that attended the first one, you may have already heard these ground rules, or if you've attended any of our other community meetings, but we're just going to go ahead and go through them briefly. We have our rebuild team panel. They will introduce themselves here shortly. We do also have our virtual participants. So when we get to the Q&A portion, we want to make sure that we speak into the mic here on either side of the room. Our rebuild team is going to go over specifics to your area of rebuild for the beachfront properties. A lot of this will be, we received some questions the last time we had this community meeting. Obviously, there's been a lot of follow-up conversations since our first beachfront home community meetings. So we're hoping to touch and give some answers on that today. We do have our Army Corps engineers. So just as we've done the last few community meetings, we're going to prioritize debris removal questions once we get through the presentation. And then also to my design professionals in the room, we do ask that you yield the floor to residents first. We want to give them the opportunity to ask the questions. So once we get the mics cleared of our resident questions for priority, then our design professionals, understanding you're yourself representing many residents. So we recognize that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Yolanda.
Thank you, Alexis. And thank you, everybody, for joining us again. This is our second meeting for Beachfront Properties. We want to thank everybody. All of the families are here, design professionals, all of those that are watching at home. We decided to have a second meeting because of the many questions that we're getting, but it's also been 5 weeks. So I want to start by thanking the panel and asking them to introduce themselves.
Hello. Oh, hi. Hi, my name is Scott. I'm with True North Compliance Services. I am a licensed civil engineer and a third-party plan checker, and mainly do the structural.
Hi, good evening. My name is Nate Weander. I'm an active duty Army officer and engineer, and I represent the EFO Palisades as their deputy commander.
Hi, I'm Jorge Rubalcaba. I'm a licensed civil engineer working in the Public Works Department, and I work in Public Works and deal with a lot of the FEMA-related questions.
I'm Tyler Eaton, principal planner with the city.
Lauren Doyle, principal geotechnical and coastal engineering reviewer for the city and helping out in EH.
Hello, I'm Mike Phipps, principal engineering geologist with Cotton Shires and consultant to the city over the past 30 years or so.
I'm Christina Clark. I'm a consulting engineering geologist with Cotton Shires.
Nick Diwali, Fire Department.
Thank you, and with that, we'll start. On the next slides. It's been 5 weeks since we first met, and we wanted to show a video of the current conditions. This video was taken a few days ago. And with this, we want to show you the progress that has happened within 5 weeks. On the properties that have been cleaned up by the Army Corps of Engineers, and also the ones that are currently doing some drilling. So just give us a couple of minutes for that video to show. Looks pretty good, and it's a lot. It's also the sign of the hope, and the sign that we're moving forward, and the sign that you will be rebuilding your homes. So it's a testimony of things coming through, and also a big gratitude to the Army Corps, and also all those contractors that have been helping with the opt-out. So we are hoping in the next weeks or so, we will share more of those same videos. And then the next video. The next video is of a parcel, actually beachfront property cleaned by the Army Corps of Engineers, and now they are starting the drilling so they can have their geotechnical team start doing the exploration. I believe this is a parcel that, in conjunction with other parcels, are taking advantage of the multi-parcel geotechnical reports. So just giving you an update on that. And then next slide. The next slides will show you where we are with debris removal. Reminding everybody, tonight is the night, 11:59 p.m. is the last time that you get to opt in or opt out. I have great news for the city. Only 10 properties on the beachfront property have been undecided of what they want to do. If you're watching from home or you are here on the please don't forget to sign in. The 10 parcels that needs to be cleaned up. We urge you to please take that benefit to sign in. And also another update for those that have opted out. In a meeting with Public Works County and the task force for the debris removal, it was shared information that there's a new deadline for the parcels to be completely cleaned up for the opt-out, and that is June 30th. So think of all the city. I am hearing also a lot of questions on, hey, as soon as the permits are given for debris removal and the cleanup, when is the deadline for everybody to clean up? So the cleanup is June 30th. And with that, I'll pass the presentation to Colonel Lieutenant Weander.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to go from big to small. I'm going to talk about the entire impact area, and then I'm going to talk specific to the beach. So I've been talking, as I look out here, I see quite a few familiar faces. We've been talking for about the last month. Currently, we have 97 debris removal crews operating across a 37 square mile impact area, the Palisades and Malibu Fire. To date, we've removed 450,000 tons of fire ash and debris. To put that into context, that's 4.5 aircraft carriers. Now, I don't see aircraft carriers every day. Maybe you do. So to put that in something a little more reasonable, I like to come in here and talk about F-150 pickup trucks. If you had an equivalent weight of F-150 trucks and you parked them bumper to bumper starting right here, they would stretch to Santa Fe, New Mexico in an unbroken line. So we talked about today's the last day to opt in, so we are very excited to know what our total mission set will be for private property debris removal. You know, in that impact area we were just talking about, there are about 6,300 homes that were destroyed by the fire. We've had about 1,200 opt out. So that means somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 and 5,000 will become the final mission set the Corps of Engineers will have to do. Today, we've removed over 1,600. With those 97 crews moving throughout the impact area, we are averaging over 40 properties a day. That's 1,200 a month. Why do I tell you that? I would argue the next 2 months are going to be crucial. The next 60 days, working at that tempo, we can get well over 60% complete with the current mission set, which will have massive impacts. More importantly, to this community, in accordance with the request of the governor, we will clear all the PCH properties by the end of May. And that will allow the state to have the additional lanes to reopen the highway. With that, I'll pass it back to Yolanda. Thank you.
We want the presentation to be sure to give the opportunity to all the homeowners and also our design professionals that still have questions being able to answer those. So with that, Tyler will give a brief presentation.
Sure. If we can just go back to the slide. So Mr. Bernstein, oh, he is here. I haven't changed my slide yet, so apologies for that. But this, you might be familiar with this. You've seen this a few times before. If you are on the beachfront, so this is the planning phase when we're designing your house, in the planning verification phase. If you are on the beachfront and you're in an area where there's potential to impact people's views, so if you are in the La Costa Beach or Carbon Beach, there are homes right adjacent on PCH that could be impacted. And so the codes that were adopted by the council require that you're going to get your rebuild plus 10%, but it requires that you first try to move laterally on your property, side to side. You can't go further seaward, but hopefully you can maybe go closer to PCH or your side property lines before you go vertical. Now, if you do not have the potential to impact properties on the land side, you do not have to meet this rule. This is only to help try to preserve views for those that may be impacted. Next slide, please. And we've heard some of the concerns from those directly on the land side on PCH there. And one thing is you are limited to the rebuild plus 10%. So this is not beachfront. This is for people just on the land side, but they might be listening tonight. If your home, your previous views become impacted from development on the beach, a thing you can do is, as part of your 10%, if you're allowed to go up to 10% in height, is put a rooftop deck in. And that can hopefully help get you back some views that may be lost from some of the FEMA challenges, FEMA increases that are allowed to the beachfront properties. Next slide, please. And I think it's low.
Hello? Yes, okay. So I'm just going to speak briefly about environmental health and beachfront on-site wastewater treatment systems. Please understand, April 24th, there will be a meeting specifically to address some questions that came up about OWTS and the potential for sewers, okay? So I'm just going to go over generally. These are the regulations that govern beachfront OWTS, and the local area management plan does require that all beachfront OWTS have supplemental treatment, which basically makes them advanced systems. So we looked at the statistics, and there are about 60 homes that actually already have advanced treatment systems on the beach already. Next slide. So with the OWTS comes the issue of shoreline protection, right? Seawalls. So if you have an OWTS on site and it doesn't have a viable shoreline protection device, you will need to build a seawall. If you have a seawall, it needs to be defined. Is it an engineered and permitted structure? It has to be code conforming. And if you have one existing, can it be repaired or rebuilt, or do you need to build a new one? There are specific reports to address those above questions, and principally the design professionals involved in those are structural engineers with marine experience, coastal engineers, and then, of course, for your house foundation and your seawall foundation, geotechnical engineers. We will be doing a combined, when it comes to building plan check, we will be combining your geotechnical and your coastal engineering review, so you won't have to wait for one to know the impact on the other. We're doing those together. And as always, don't forget, ask your design professionals and talk to your neighbors about whether you can combine investigations.
Thank you, Lauren. And with that, we want to continue to remind you and inviting you to visit our Malibu Rebuild Center. We have already seen more than 197 families, and we have, as some of you come back, about 60. We hope that you continue using the resources. Planning department also has processed 14 and approved 6. And building and safety, we are also having preliminary reviews for a property on Carbon Beach. We have reviewed already the foundation system, and we are hopefully having that submitted very soon on that for complete structural and architectural plans coming our way. So with that, I will open the presentation for your questions.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. Okay, so we are going to start taking Q&A. Just a reminder of what I said earlier, we are going to prioritize our debris removal questions first. Our Army Corps partners have limited time, so we want to make sure we get to those. And we do ask for residents first. So we have microphones on both sides of the room. I recognize when we did this earlier for our first beach community meeting, we did bring the mic to you, but there was some confusion about people feeling like they were out of order as to when they raised their hand. So if you want to line up behind either one of these microphones, we'll be able to take your questions. Want to kick us off?
Colonel or
Colonel Weander.
Okay, hi, Colonel. How do you vet the debris removal folks? Like tomorrow, they're going to start doing my phase 1 and 2 combined, and I've had 2 different entity contacts saying they're going to do it. Of course, I don't know who's who. How have you guys vetted to make sure that these folks all know what they're doing and all that? That's one part of it.
Okay, well, I'll answer the first part.
Okay.
So that has evolved. So
Okay.
I'll probably bore you with this, give you more than you want to know.
Okay.
Historically, phase 1 is an EPA requirement. Specific to the beach, there were many properties that it was not safe when the EPA was here to get out there and do the hazardous household debris removal. Or I'm sorry, the hazardous household materials. So they left and they said, hey, we're deferring this to phase 2, Corps of Engineers, we need you to go do this. So for most folks, those that lived on the hillsides, EPA probably did it. For those living on the beach, most likely it's the Corps of Engineers. To do that, we have several subcontractors working for us. So we have a subcontractor named Tetra Tech, who will most likely be the one you'll be engaging with. That's the folks that call you and say, hey, we're coming out on Tuesday to do your house. That's most likely a Tetra Tech person. And they manage the runway where I'm going to your house, I'm going to their house, I'm going to her house. They do that. Then we'll have a series of subcontractors that actually do the excavation. And when you get your 72-hour call, when you meet them the day of, the actual subcontractor doing the physical removal will be the team that you will discuss with. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, and I've noticed that on several sites that have received clearance, there's a fence up. Is that a fence that the Corps leaves to protect it from the public just falling in, or what? How is that working?
Yes or no? I appreciate the question. So we do. So the general rule is if there's a 2-foot drop or more, it's a potential safety hazard.
Okay.
So we'll put that fence up there just to keep people from falling on your property.
Okay. And the final one with respect to not the Tetra, but the actual drilling site. And I've noticed firsthand from watching other neighbors, there is an Army Corps representative there as they're working, correct? Is that person that's on site also familiar with the engineering component of what these subcontractors are doing? Because I have
Yes.
steel getting removed. I'm just curious how that,
Yeah, so short answer is yes. So we have a habitual relationships. The Corps engineers, the red shirts, are all volunteers. Everyone that you see in a red shirt has volunteered to leave their home district and come out here for 30, 60, 90, 120 days to support this community.
Okay.
What you're probably referring to are quality assurance reps. So they'll go through a training iteration, learn exactly what that crew is supposed to do. Then they'll integrate and they'll have the same crews every day. And they'll work with that subcontractor and say, hey, you're supposed to take that, you're not supposed to take that. Are you doing this properly in accordance with our best practices? And we update those best practices continuously. So there's continual training for both the contractor and then the quality assurance.
Understood. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Colonel. Marty King, local contractor. I wanted to ask you, I've had 3 different sites cleaned by the Army Corps and by ECC and by the subcontractor below the ECC. And the thing I'm getting on the property, one property on Las Flores Beach and 2 on Carbon Beach, and obviously the beach profile and the profile from the beach to the ocean to the highway, they're all different. Carbon is what it is and blah, 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 obviously. The thing I'm running into is the Caltrans blanket policy of we're not going to take any concrete if it would any way, shape, or form in God's green earth possibly damage the highway, which, I've lived on the highway my whole life. So I totally get that. But in a lot of cases, it just makes no sense because I have clients that all 3 of the clients who have just done their homes, they're all old school, old term Malibu people who paid off their house 20 years ago, 30 years ago. They're retired. They're just going to maybe be able to rebuild. And so now we're going to put, tens of thousands of dollars more of debris removal on these people's hands. Now, the one down in Las Flores, I understand. I went with the ECC guys and talked to them, and they saw the logic. They go, yeah. And, we ran it up the chain, and even the Army Corps, yeah, you're right. This should happen. And then, but this blanket thing from coming down from Caltrans, I don't see how that fits every situation, because of the 2 that I have on Carbon right now, it just makes no sense because the beach profile is, so close to the ocean profile, and it's not going to damage the highway in any way, but they're crippled by this. So I ask everybody around, where is a Caltrans representative? Where are these guys at if they're the ones who are making the call? So I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate your comment. I'll probably need to talk to you afterwards because I do have a meeting with Caltrans tomorrow, so I'd like to specifically understand what we're talking about. I'll just say our standard thing, and you've probably heard me say this in previous weeks. Our general rule, and I don't think this applies to what you're describing, is we're not going to take any structure retaining soil just for erosion purposes. Specific to the highway, I would like to talk to you after just so I can better understand and communicate that to Caltrans. I'm meeting with them at 9 o'clock tomorrow.
Great. I totally appreciate that. And then even from the last meeting I was at, these owners are already still going to get stuck with the wood piles. It is what it is. But the first thing that someone's going to go in, even once the site is together, they're going to have to go in there, clean it up, pull the piles out, the wood piles, and haul those off. So that's going to be another, ding on their rebuild money. So that's just, definitely a pet peeve of mine. Because what's a 10 or 12 inch wood pile that's sitting in flat sand? What's that supporting? Nothing. I'll talk to you after.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
I just wanted to add, part of the reason they leave the wood piles there is so your structural engineers know where they are. And when you're designing, when you're reconstructing, I don't know that they have to be completely removed. Okay. All right. Right. Okay.
Just a quick addition to that question is really about the drain pipes as well that come from the other side of the PCH under the highway between, for example, 2 of our properties that has not been uncovered by yet. Her debris removal has happened, mine has not, and so we don't even know where that pipe is yet, and Caltrans should be there.
So if I understand the question is you have a drainage structure crossing the highway between your 2 properties, and your concern is we're going to uncover that during debris removal.
Correct. And if Caltrans is going to be there to make sure that structure is still viable.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you afterwards and get that address because, like I said, I'm meeting with Caltrans in the morning.
And just to add to that conversation, because I've been part of some of the site visits with not only ECC, but also the engineers from LA County Public Works. and the geotechnical engineers from Caltrans and the structural engineers are there also present. So we will get your addresses, but my understanding, those visits from their Caltrans engineers are constant and they're present at the time of the removal.
Yeah, and one key point I'd like to make is for debris removal, we're not digging to full depth. Best science has shown through the FEMA scientists over the last 25 years of fires, really 3 inches is all you need to remove anything that's a hazard to anyone. We're taking 6 inches just for an abundance of caution. So, I will take the comment and be interested in the location, but we're not digging terribly deep. Thank you.
Real quick before we go to our next question, just for our community members to remember to speak into the mic, just because we are trying to capture this, that we'll post later on our Rebuilds website, but also we have our virtual participants. So if we don't speak right into the mic, it makes it more difficult for them to be a part of the conversation.
Phase X planned for getting the debris out of the ocean. So there was a good job cleaning up my property, but there's a bathtub floating in front of the house. There's beams. There's all kinds of things. So just curious if there's a plan for the next phase.
I can talk about the federal efforts. So we're here by the request of the governor of California and the authorization of the president of the United States through FEMA. And my authority ends at the structural footprint of the property. So we can, as you say, I think we've taken your debris. So that's where we end. Anything beyond that would be out of scope for the federal government.
Does the city have any thoughts?
So as far as the city, we continue monitoring. We have brought this issue to the state level, to the governor's office. We're working with LA Public Works. So yes, we know that needs to be addressed as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm co-trustee of my late uncle's estate on PCH. And first I want to greatly thank the Army Corps of Engineers. You finished last week. It was fabulous. Everyone was professional, polite, responsive. My question first is regarding the PCH and the retaining wall. This may not be Army Corps of Engineers, but we're hearing different stories about who may or may not be reinforcing that retaining wall that's there.
So if I understand your question, are you talking about a seawall?
No, I'm talking about the retaining wall along PCH.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when you say K-rail, I'm sorry, there's a lot of K-rail.
No, it's not the K-rail. It's not the K-rail. There was an actual retaining wall at PCH, and then the house came, and we put extra retaining wall there too. But now it's kind of flimsy and perhaps crumbling, and so would PCH. We've been holding up PCH for a while.
No, very good. Yeah. For the Army Corps of Engineers, that'd be out of scope for us.
Right, but is someone considering reinforcing PCH?
The short answer is yes. Sorry, okay. Alexis here. And we don't have a representative with Caltrans that's here with us tonight. And as the Colonel mentioned, that's a bit out of scope for Army Corps, but we will be able to take those Caltrans specific questions. We know for our beachfront properties, this is a high priority area in talking about the retaining wall, not the seawalls, the retaining wall. And we do know it's top of mind for Caltrans, especially with all the work that is happening with Army Corps and now what the governor's declaration over the weekend did in trying to expedite that. So before we open PCH at the end of May, understanding that's the goal, we do have to make sure it's safe for all the wheels on as well as the properties to be able to be rebuilt, right? So just saying that in short order, Caltrans should be having a plan as to what that's going to look like. And we are very much a part of those conversations as well as with the LA County Public Works. So we are all working together. And as soon as we have it, that will be shared with the community.
Thank you. And I just have a separate question, which may be handled at the April 24th septic meeting, but I was wondering if you're considering expanding the beach, replenishing the sand on the beach and getting the beach further out rather than, us having to build a 15-foot seawall to keep it from coming in.
That's something that I mentioned last week when we were in the meeting talking about sewers and stuff like that. It's one possibility, right? Of all the things you could do, that would be one possibility. it's a much larger issue and it would require regional effort, I think, and also state willingness. So I think it's beyond staffs. But I mean, I'd love to go. I'd love the Broad Beach project to go, right? Because then that would benefit Zuma as well, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please. For the Colonel, I have a couple of general questions. If the top of walls are cut off because they don't meet the structural requirements, in other words, if we of walls or of footings that look like they're competent, if we cut off the top, say 2 feet, and had them on the site, will you haul those away as part of the debris? In other words, they'll be cut in advance of you coming to clean the site.
So just to make sure I understand the question, you have a...
For instance, let me make it maybe clearer. If you have a retaining wall and the structural components, say the bolts were 1/2 inch because the project was built some time ago, and now they have to be 5/8. So we know we're going to have to cut off, if the wall is competent and it'll survive, we know we're going to have to remove that and put in the 5/8 bolts to be code compliant. If we cut off the stem, the top 2 feet, knowing that we're going to dowel in and place the wall back, will you haul those off as part of the debris?
I think probably the best option would be in the 360 site assessment, have a conversation with the actual crew doing the work. From what I'm hearing, that sounds like that would be out of scope. That would not be fire ash and debris. That would be additional removal. Now, if we don't do a la carte removal, it's generally, you either want your foundation removed or you don't. And if you do want your foundation removed, we'll remove everything we feel safe doing that is not retaining soil. So I don't think what you're describing would be something we could do.
Okay. Second question, and this is more general. I'm just interested in, of all the houses that you cleared so far, whether they're on the beach or on the land side, how many foundations have you taken out? All of them? Some of them? Part of them? What would you say percentage-wise have survived?
Part of them. Now, I'm not going to use the term survived. I don't want to make any guarantee that they're structurally sound for future.
No, I understand that.
But I would say about 1/3 of the families that have opted in have elected to retain their foundation, and we've left that foundation and slab in some cases.
All right, thank you. I'll be asking questions. I'm a local architect and done many houses on the beach over the years. I'll be asking questions specifically of the group later. Thank you for your information.
So not to be repetitive, but if I could ask, with Caltrans' involvement with what's going on right now, whoa, too close. You can tell I'm not a musician. With Caltrans being involved, right, I've got a little issue that we're going to work through, and I'd like to speak with you guys afterwards too. But Alexis, you mentioned Caltrans' involvement. Do we have any idea, and I know it's an unfair question about timing, but with the sense of urgency with everything ramping up, and essentially we got 6 weeks to get this done, any hiccup causes difficulty with the process. And I had a situation at my site today where things couldn't go forward as planned, and I feel horrible, not just that my site's not clean, but that I'm impacting other people because it was a hiccup in the system. And it's tied to some of these things that are getting talked about. So is there any kind of timeline to be able to set a target to say by this date we're going to get it resolved?
So for the question, you're talking resolved to where the highway is open? Is that the question?
No, what my question is what I wasn't aware of till this morning is Caltrans' involvement relative to decisions on the seawall, as well as the bulkhead that the last lady was speaking to. So with their involvement, I get the impression some things have changed that we weren't necessarily aware of, no matter how prepared we thought we were. So with them being involved in the process and some things changing along with the speed of events that things are going, we don't always agree. So within the group, and I know it's an unfair question because you only have a limited scope, but others are inputting to what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. So it's a bigger discussion. And I'm just wondering, how do we bring that to a head within the time frame?
Let me try that again. Okay, I got turned on this time. Let's have a conversation afterwards. Sounds like you have a very specific case I can probably help with.
I do, but it ties to some other things.
Okay.
And I'm looking out for some neighbors in addition to my own property.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure we bring it together, and it'd be great to talk about.
No, very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And just before Ed speaks, Dean, to your point in your question on a timeline on the broader Caltrans conversation, we don't have a timeline, but they understand that we need to be able to communicate out so the residents can be assured, and as process proceeds, we're able to manage expectations. So our hope is within the coming weeks, obviously before Army Corps finishes their cleanup, but the sooner the better. But I don't have an exact date as to when Caltrans will have all of these items figured out.
And I know it's a bigger issue, but what I'm wondering is the items that could be tied to the debris removal. So just thinking out loud, for us to be able to support them and making sure we're all cleaned up by the end of May, we kind of need Caltrans lined out in the next couple of weeks, or they might not be able to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
And just another thing to consider, Army Corps of Engineers is not solely cleaning PCH. There's 70 property owners that decided to opt out. So that adds to the complexity on this topic.
That it? Yeah. My name is Ed Niles. There's quite a few people that have come to me about trying to understand how they can expedite this process because of economic reasons. How do they determine where they're going financially? Where are they going in terms of the size or what they're thinking of doing? Let's talk about the beach properties. We got together, worked out a series of options of different types of structural systems that could be applied to the beachfront properties, allowing those systems to be built initially to support not only the septic process, but also support everything laterally and vertically, based upon the idea of what you see every day is these large apartment structures built upon concrete reinforced structures that support the parking garages. So the idea is that basically what we came up with was a direction that allows us to have a contractor whose only responsibility is to build the substructures on the site, hopefully in groups of 5 to 10. The elevation obviously has been established by the ocean uprush engineer, the geology, the depth of penetration, all that is all part of the game. The bottom line became that Pacific Coast Highway needed to be reinforced in every case that I looked at. So we looked at possibly about 75 to 85 lots. And it seems to make sense that if a platform is built and that the original property line is scored on that platform, you can go ahead and build anything you want because the design of the platform is based upon a 3-story structure, some rigid frame, shear wall analysis, all lateral, everything taken out of the diaphragms, and it just sits there. Or it can be a skeletal structure. But that allows a particular type of contractor, let's say his specialty is certainly concrete, but drilling and all that, to go ahead and do things in a very, you might say, unobstructed manner. And that's what's important here, is that we try to devise something. Okay, if we got to that point, who is it at the city that we actually sit down quietly and talk about that being a reality so that these people can move ahead with some assurance that they don't have to treat their property independently, because doing so requires twice the number of pilings, twice the amount of work, nearly impossible to build next to somebody that's already done something. So that idea basically is an idea that I think I would like an answer for. Who is that person?
And you can meet with me. I will take the lead on that. So I will make an appointment with you to see you.
I did leave a message for you, by the way.
I'll give you a call back. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to do one more call for our debris questions before we just switch over to general questions about rebuild for beachfront properties.
Alexis, could I just say something?
Of course.
I just want to say something on behalf of all the staff. And we get a lot of emails. We get, 125 emails a day, and we get a lot of phone calls. So if you call and leave a message, send an email, and follow up with a text, right? And give a little bit of time. We're really doing the best we can between meeting with people and trying to get back with people and trying to follow up the meetings with specific information that's useful and memorializes the meeting, right? So everybody knows what was said and what was agreed to. So, you know, the days of single phone calls and leaving a message in the volume that we have, Ed, I'm just saying, just doesn't, it's hard. It doesn't apply to you? Okay.
Okay, switch. Thank you for that, Lauren. Yes, so we're gonna switch gears over here. So these are just now, you know, the general questions above the debris removal. And thank you so much, Colonel, for your time here today. Okay, so general rebuild questions specific to our beachfront properties. We'll do our in-person first, and then before we wrap, just before 6 o'clock, we will take our virtual participant questions. Again, just a reminder, we do have 2 microphones in the room, and to really speak into the mic so we're able to capture your question and our virtual participants are able to hear.
Hi, Asher Ross, local building contractor. Speaking to Ed's question, and also a question to the panel. Ed, we've met at length with people like Kyle, the owner of Alpha Structural, local builders and local structural engineering firms. We are ready to do exactly what you're suggesting. We've been talking about it for over a month. We have absolutely no idea how to coordinate it with local architects and the city, because the city cannot specifically recommend local builders to build the local houses. So how could we work on a plan like Ed proposed with the city to provide that opportunity to any homeowners that want it without you guys appearing biased?
I just want to stay. There was a lot in your in what you just stated. This is the first time that I hear about this idea. So we will make a time to meet with Ed, and you can be part of it. I had no idea that you were having difficulties with the process. I have met with you outside, and this has never been raised. But thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll be happy to meet with you after this and give you direction.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
I have one additional question. I imagine that you guys have reviewed the City of LA's rebuild recommendation from their chief recovery officer. If I'm not mistaken, the City of LA spent about $500,000 receiving recommendations from Steve Soveroff. Whether or not they paid him or not, his major suggestion was that given the unprecedented scope and size of the rebuild and staffing constraints, he recommends that all architects and engineers be allowed to self-certify their projects. Is the city willing to consider something like that? And if not, can you tell us why?
That discussion is going to be done on April 24th. So we welcome you to come in. Council will be having that discussion. It starts at 2 o'clock. I can send you a link so you can come in.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You can hold it up for me. Don Schmitz. Tyler. So, yeah, it's been a long time since midnight last night, right? It currently is a code, as I understand it, for a wastewater system to cross a property line or to be shared across a property line requires a conditional use permit from the planning department. Now, there's all kinds of fur flying in regards to what are we going to do with all these beach houses as it pertains to the wastewater. There's even conversations and deliberations with the city council. They've directed Rob, Director of Public Works, to look into a sewer line. But meanwhile, things are moving forward. And I have a number of clients who it looks like it might be advantageous for them to share a wastewater system. It would, of course, have to be documented to the city's satisfaction that it has the capacity, but not all of the beach houses are created equal. There's actually some of them that don't fill up the lot from lot line to lot line. Some of them had, under their old footprints, they had a corridor down the side, things of that nature. It would be advantageous if my microphone worked regularly. I'll get really close and in with it now, so that that could be entertained, where perhaps two houses would have a shared wastewater system. Alexis is going to come save me here. The whole city runs on this woman, in case you guys haven't noticed. Thank you, Alexis. So it would be not necessarily everywhere, and it would certainly require a code modification. There would be a lot for the health department to look at in regards to that. But from a planning perspective, that might be a very useful tool so that we can streamline the process, and so some of these folks can actually also recognize some cost savings. Of course, one of the biggest things that's so gut-wrenching for a lot of these property owners is that they have to protect the wastewater system, which means an individual seawall. If they could buddy up on that, that might be a lifesaver for a lot of these people. So I'm sure Lauren will have some comments on this. Others of you may as well. But I'm less concerned about that, because the mechanics of that as it pertains to engineering it to their satisfaction is something that can easily be done. It's more of a planning constraint. And so I'd like to plant that seed with you, Tyler, and whether or not you think that could be something that the city looks at to modify their code for the fire rebuilds on the beach so that they don't have to process conditional use permits to implement that approach.
Yeah, that's definitely a council decision, because as you said, it's going to require a code amendment. The Malibu Municipal Code does require that if you have sewage lines that cross property boundaries, that you do need a conditional use permit. And usually the catch is that both of the lots are owned by the same owner. And so there could be complications if they're not. A lot of times we have them do a lot tie to tie those lots together, since the accessory OWTS is serving the primary use on the other lot. So it's not as clean and easy. We'll have to look into it. But ultimately, it would be a code amendment that the council would have to consider, and then we can kind of look into more of the technicalities about how that could work. I don't know if building on that.
No, and I appreciate today's meeting. It seems like we are getting through more ideas, and just to be fair to the conversation and also to staff, I prefer that we do have those meetings and talk about its specifics on it. There was 2 different ideas brought out to us. This is not an easy answer. Eventually, council will need to weigh in, but we do need to talk about it, how it will work from the perspective of environmental health. Also, how many property owners are going to be doing this. So yeah, we're willing to consider, but that conversation needs to look more in depth and see what else other ramifications will have. But I'm taking notes, and we'll make a meeting and we'll talk about it, possibly Thursday, and then I'll meet with you on Thursday also.
Hi, I'm Carmel McFadden. I work with at Burge Architects. So I have a couple of questions. The first one is, when the previous house did not have official view corridors on either side of the house, are we allowed to put a ramp in to get from the PCH street level up to the new house floor level? So in some cases, it might be 5 feet.
So you mentioned view corridor and you mentioned a ramp. So you're talking like a access on the side of the property to go upstairs, like exterior?
Actually, it's for where we have to raise the finished floor because of FEMA. For those houses that did not have an official view corridor, we've got an elevation difference of about maybe 4 feet. So can we just sort of ramp up?
Like a ramp for the garage, for the cars to kind of...
A ramp, no, just a pedestrian ramp, like a 1 in 12 along the side, so that someone can walk and get to their rear deck, or actually firefighters if there's a fire, they can go for access. Actually, that's what really.
It's possible. There's two issues. There's one is if you do have a view corridor, you have to maintain your view corridor. If you don't, then you don't have to establish one under this rebuild. But the other issue is setbacks and height of structures within setbacks, and so we'd have to look at that unique scenario to determine what are the how tall is this ramp and what are the other impacts. But to answer your question, if you do not have a view corridor already established on your property, you're not required to put one in.
So if on one of my projects we had an existing garage that was only 18 inches off the property line. So there was no view there at all. So if we move the garage to have better fire access, we could theoretically have a ramp.
You could theoretically do that, yes, as
Okay.
long as you're within the same envelope as the previous structure. You can shift your garage in different areas of the envelope.
Okay. And then the second question is, so for beachfront houses, the 10% extra footprint that we can add cannot be added on the beach side, so it has to be added on the PCH side. If we had a pre-existing house that was 2 stories with a 1-story garage, are we able to add that extra square footage above the 1-story garage? So we would be more than 10% in height of that garage, but it would be added to the second floor, basically.
So we'll have to take a look. The height is measured based on the top of the structure, the highest point. And so there are occasions when if you have a lower element of your structure at a lower point, it could go potentially taller than 10% because the 10% is measured from the overall height of the structure.
Of the highest point.
Correct.
Okay, so if we were adding that area, could we, if the new structure gets elevated because of FEMA, so it creates a non-conforming issue, if we're adding something, we would have to stay under the, could we sort of add a small portion to meet the existing height because it's already there?
Don't like to make promises because I have to look at every plan is different.
I can come and show you something.
But you mentioned something about creating a non-conforming condition. The answer would be no.
Right.
So you can maintain your previous non-conforming conditions, how they were prior to the fire. You cannot create a new one. And whatever 10% addition that you put onto your property, height and square footage, that portion of the structure has to conform with today's code.
Okay. And once you get through, you've got the quick PV process. If you wanted to add slightly more than 10%, if you wanted to add an awning, a trellis or something, is that a PV, is that an APR or a CDP? What's the process after that? And is it expedited?
Okay.
Sorry.
Good question.
It's a lot of questions.
A good question. You're supposed to rebuild back what you had plus 10%. Let's start with that. There's some leniencies we give. For example, this is not beachfront related, but it could be beachfront related. Let's say you never had an outdoor barbecue kind of area, but you want to add one here. If there's minimal impacts and it's on the existing deck, we may give that to you.
Okay.
So there are things that are minimal that are considered new that because they're within your existing structures and you're not expanding the footprints of those existing structures, those may be given.
Okay.
But it's a case-by-case basis. In terms of trellises, there are issues with those on beachfront properties because when you attach them to the building, it now becomes part of the building string line. And so we'd have to make some determinations about where your string lines are and your deck and your building have different string lines. So the trellises on beachfront properties aren't as easy as putting in, but if it's like minor things, like you wanted to put, like I said, a barbecue area, kind of benching around your deck for seating and stuff like that, even if it was never there before, those minor things might be allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Tyler. Quick question for you with regards to that leniency word. I'm a little confused, and I've also just got a text from one of my neighbors up the beach with respect to if you've had your phase 2 done and you have your survey and you have your seawall and whatever else that's in conformance, how much time is ticking before you must either vest or rebuild your property? Because I'm told up to 6 years. Somebody else said, no, it's a rigid 2 years. You must fast track it within 2 years. What is what is it? What is it?
There's kind of two things going on. So one, I believe you're talking about your non-conforming aspects of your property and how long how long do you have to get those back before your property then has to come into complete conformance. And I'm speaking a lot of planner language, so I apologize if I'm getting too much into weeds. You have 6 years. You basically have 6 years to re-entitle your home to the extent it was before. After 6 years, you may have to bring your house closer to compliance with today's code. So it might be a greater setback. You might not get back that 35 feet you had before because the code only allows 24 or 28 on the beach. So you have 6 years to get your planning approval. Once you get your planning approval and you go through the building plan check process, then the building permit has different timelines before expiration.
Okay, within the scope of that, then, with this whole rebuild fast track, are you really fast tracked, or is it you have 6 years, in which case you just take the track you want?
That's correct. It's up to the owner. So if you want to come in right now and get the ball rolling, we're here. We're ready to go. If you want to sit on it and think about it and take your time and figure out what you want to do, you have up to 6 years to get back the house you had.
And do any of those rights or benefits translate to a future owner, or do they have to start at base one again? If you transfer it, for example.
So those rights, they lay with the land.
Right.
Yeah, but there are things. So, for example, the council last night had directed us to come back with a fee waiver program. That's only for the owner at the time of the fire. So not everything is transferable in terms of your entitlement process to 6 years. That runs with the land.
Excellent. Thank you.
This time I'll tell you what my name is. Tom Torres, architect, local architect. I have a question regarding properties, several different types of properties. One is, like, for instance, down at Tuna Beach, 19056, for instance, 1936, which is just a few houses away, of which I did both those, 19040, which I also did. When we submitted through the public domain to acquire records, 36 and 40 came back with a full set of plans, sections, elevations. 56, we got a site plan that I did and nothing else. So we have to reconstruct the project from some limited photographs. Will that be like how will that work? Because will they just rely on our judgment and the owner's judgment? Would we say this is what's there? We have photographs of the exterior. We have limited photographs on the interior. So how do we establish without having to prolong the process? That's one question. The second question, if I may, is that, well, why don't we answer that one and then we'll go to the next one.
Yeah, the evidence thing is we're open to all types of evidence. So you can use photographs, you can use Google Earth, you can use different things to kind of piece it together. What I would suggest is hopefully there's at least an assessor record of your property. That's kind of your baseline. Try to establish how much square footage you had. Hopefully the assessor has like a drawing of your footprint. It sounds like you have a site plan at least.
Well, these were done in the county. They're 35 feet high. They're 3-story on the beach. The third story, if I may add, is a mezzanine, but they all are beach oriented. I have photographs from the water side of what the property looks like, and there's several of them. I don't need to go on, but many houses in that area. Some we have limited information on, some we have a full set of information. I just want to make sure that what process is the most efficient to move forward with processes where we're dependent on photographs only.
It's dependent on the package you put together. So put together a complete comprehensive package that argues all of the square footage, all of the massing that you're trying to go for. And that can be Google Earth, photographs, assessor data, old plans, old photos, whatever you got. Put a package in to argue your square footages and your massing. And then if we need more information, if there's a questionable area, then we'll ask for more information.
All right, thank you. The last meeting that we had, I asked the question about these houses down on the Tuna Beach, for instance. and some on Dog Beach, some on Las Flores Beach as well, that are going to be elevated substantially higher than they currently are. And the process of whether or not we're able to accommodate the footprint of the house or the design of the house to accommodate this entry. I think the lady asked the question about the ramp. You know, the ramp, if it doesn't block the view corridor, it's consistent with the spirit of the Coastal Commission. But what we're talking about is substantially higher than 4 feet. And I'd asked this question before because we're not debiting it against the 10%. There's really no place to put the 10% per se, but we do know that it's going to have an impact on the design. Whether that means that part of the building may move up higher or something, but it's the only way we can get in. We haven't spent any time as of yet on the design because we're getting the data on all the FEMA and the implications, center line elevations, etc. of PCH. But we do know they're going to move up substantially. How will that be handled? And how can we be part of the team of solving this in an expeditious way?
Great question again. And I did some research on this since the last time you asked it. Right now, you're limited to 10%. However, we are coming back with a policy document for the council to review, and at that time, I would bring this concern to their attention. So, and at one of our special council meetings, they did entertain the idea that if there's certain things that are necessary for your structure that are beyond the 10%, they might be okay with that, and that's going to be recorded in our planning policy document. So, it's not the 24th, but it's on one of the agendas. Maybe Alexis knows that we're going to come back with this policy document that further analyzes the codes that we approved back in March.
So at last night's regular city council meeting, thank you, Tyler. Yes, last night's regular city council meeting, we did talk about the upcoming agendas and what council prioritizes. So I would say there's this running master list of items and topics that the council has to consider. The policy document Tyler's referring to is one of those. That would be, I do know that it has not been agendized for the next 2 meetings. We've agendized what is to be talked about all the way through May 8th. We will be on April 28th, talking about that running list and prioritizing those for future meetings. So at that time, the council will make a decision as to when the planning policy document needs to be heard at one of the special work sessions.
Okay, thank you. My last question, I'm sure I'll have 1,000 more later. Some question I forgot to ask on behalf of one of my clients, but when you talk about prevailing code governing, yes, we have the municipal code, but we also have overlay district, the La Costa overlay district. The overlay district is very specific about heights, setbacks, things such as that. Don't they precede or eclipse the municipal code? Can't we rely on them for the height of buildings, setbacks, etc.?
Yes, they do. They do supersede the general code. Where the overlay district is silent, then we defer to the general code.
Yes, I understand. I just want to make sure because it's easy to come to a different interpretation when a house is gone and you're talking about where the 10% starts from if you're going to raise the lid or you're going to change the ceiling per se or change the roof structure for that matter. What governs if you're less than what was there that was burnt out and you can establish that? Can we rely on La Costa generally? Would that be a general question that would be yes?
Project that we discussed, Tom, and this is good for everyone, but
the dog doesn't agree with the answer.
He doesn't like my answer, so I apologize for that. So the La Costa overlay, not the La Costa, yours was La Costa, but overlay districts in general govern the policy. So if you're in an overlay district and your height allows you up to 30 feet in that zone, that's your maximum height, not the 18 feet non-beachfront or 24 feet beachfront. What your case was the height was now becoming beyond 10%, and we're asking for a default to the maximum allowed in that zone. That is not allowed because if that was allowed, there'd be no reason to add the 10% height limit. You would just be allowed to go to the maximum of that zoning. And so people may want, if they had a 10-foot tall house or a 12-foot tall house, we've got this question a lot. This is for a non-beachfront, that they want to go up to 18 feet because that's what their zoning allows if they were to build a new house today. You are building a new house technically, but you're not, because you're taking advantage of the fire rebuild code, which only allows plus 10% in height. So I hope that.
No, I understand. I wasn't actually thinking specifically about what you were very specific about in terms of my answer. I was thinking about not the houses that we wanted to make the driveways accessible, which in La Costa there's several. But I was thinking more about where a client may want to change the roofscape, where they may have a severe pitched roof that looked like a chalet in Stad, and they want to look like they're in Malibu, and we want to do something accordingly. I wasn't sure what standard would govern. That was more what I was thinking.
Oh, okay, I got you. You can change the design completely. You don't have to go back to if you had a mid-century before, you can do a craftsman style. It doesn't have to be the same design. What matters to us is the envelope. So height, square footage, and bulk. So as long as you can demonstrate that those new roof elements don't go outside the bulk of the existing structure by more than 10%, it could be allowed.
And that's 10% of what was existing. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Me? Hi, I'm Paula Logan. I want to get this right. I'm at a standstill, and I've been hearing about this over and over again. I'm waiting for the guidelines for the coastal engineering and the technical reports to be issued. And I've been told week by week or that you're going to give it to them, and then they haven't gotten them. So do you have, let's start out with the coastal engineering, guidelines for the coastal engineering?
And this was discussed last night at City Council. I
have it.
Yes, we're having it tomorrow. Thursday.
We can pick it up tomorrow?
Yes, we're finalizing and we will have it ready for tomorrow.
Let's
Paula,
allow staff.
Paula, I just want to say we've been waiting. Because we started the community meetings, and I understand because I was the one that said March 31st, right? And then subsequently, I think on that day or the next day, I explained that we were waiting for the community meetings to finish and to get all the input back because we don't want to issue these things twice. Right. So I in fact heard new things today that now I'm going to have to discuss with Tyler regarding elevations on the beach, a certain situation that we hadn't thought about before. Right. So this week, I mean, I know Yolanda said yesterday she's got them. We're finalizing them. Certainly, absolutely by Friday. Okay. But what we're trying to do is make sure that we cover all the issues that need to be covered, that we don't over-specify things that are already written.
It's just a yes or no question. I have my
right. But had you listened to some of the other meetings? I've said at least
I've been listening to my experts.
Okay, in at least two other meetings. Okay. And I know Janelle, if Janelle is the one that has asked, she has asked me, and I told her when the community meetings were done.
So I want to keep focus. I want to keep respectful dialogue happening both from our rebuild team here and then to our community members. So as far as community guidelines happening, we've talked about it. They were supposed to be released this week. That is still happening.
Yeah, that is still on target.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to repeat my question. I don't think I was disrespectful. I mean, my engineers keep telling me, the week before, we haven't gotten it. So we're going to get it tomorrow? No. That is not, it shouldn't be personal. I mean, it should not be personal. It's just a straight question. It's a yes or no question.
We're going to take a minute. So understanding that the guidelines that you are asking for, that they are this week, they will be out. And I do ask for everyone's flexibility and understanding. If we get input that something might need to change, We obviously don't want to do that either, right? We wanted to have these community meetings, gather the feedback, be able to post the document one time. I will say we're living in a space where things still continue to evolve. But just to give you a definitive, our goal and target is this week that those will be issued and you can have those as a guiding document.
By Friday.
By Friday,
Okay.
at the latest.
And that's the geotechnical reports for, let's see, it's the coastal engineering and the technical reports. Both of those.
That is correct.
By Friday.
There is just one. It's one document. It's the geotechnical and coastal.
That's
Yes.
all I want. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paula.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope. I think he is. Oh. This is a quick question. I think Tyler already addressed it. That you are considering for those of us who had beach homes that had utility buildings under flood zone, for example, air conditioning or water heaters, etc. Do they get included into the 10%, or are they being considered as possibly above and beyond that 10%?
Did you already have it before the fire?
It was under the house. Yes.
Would they need to raise that for FEMA?
Yes. Is what I heard from my mouth.
All new utilities would have to be above the base flood elevation.
Correct.
Yeah.
So does that get included in the 10% is what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
we would let you basically put it somewhere else that meets the FEMA requirements.
Would I still be able to add the 10% to the house?
The
and
10%
at
square
that?
footage you're talking about?
Yeah.
If it was counted as square footage, then yes. If it was mechanical area that was not counted as square footage, it may not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, it's Christopher Sorensen, Sorensen Architects. So I'm just going to kind of second what Ed Niles said, and what I think the Malibu Architects Association has been continuing to ask for is support on kind of economies of scale, mainly for the beach houses. I know we had the sewer meeting we had last week. If anyone wasn't there, and if anyone's interested in listening, I strongly urge that you guys show up on the 24th and voice your opinion. I think unanimously we heard that there was a lot of support. The council was hearing, and they set up this secondary meeting on the 24th to have more numbers and more specifics. Again, phase 2 is already in process, but it would need to be redirected to the beach homes. But back to this seawall that was also brought up last week, and I'm sure it'll be continued at the 24th, but anyone that didn't hear that, this continuous seawall to support Pacific Coast Highway, which is a state highway. It also has a federal interest in it. So with Caltrans, what I don't understand is why Caltrans representative is not at any one of these hearings, and if they can be here on the 24th, I think that'd be very important, because obviously that needs a lot of funding. But the cost of that seawall for everyone to build is about minimum $250,000 per property, and probably closer to $500,000 per property. So if you're not aware of that, it's a very expensive build, and to do it all in one continuous way to support Pacific Coast Highway is very important. And then, of course, just again to second what Ed said, to build one nice platform for everyone to build on. If everyone wants to individually do their own septic systems and seawalls or foundations, have at it, of course. That's your private property right, but I'm sure, speaking for most homeowners that are underinsured, have lived there for years, people just want a good foundation, they want a flush-up toilet, they want it to work, and they want a seawall, they don't want PCH caving in, right? And so one of the things that'll be brought up again on next Thursday.
Sir,
Yeah,
I feel
go
like
ahead.
we end up always having this exchange at the meeting as far as, do you have a question for the rebuild team?
Well, the question for the rebuild team is, and I know I've asked this question before,
Okay.
but is just to, can we have support for and actually it's actually for you, Alexis, because I know, as the deputy city manager, and it was very clearly articulated to us by the council, they were looking to you and to Joe, who is the city manager, who effectively is contracted and paid to carry out the city council's orders. And there was quite a bit of a back and forth about how actually city government gets done and achieved. The council was kind of, kind of looking back and forth, wondering what to do. And then they finally had to direct you and Joe to come up with things. So what I would say is there a way that we can ask the council again that we can have some concerted effort for all these neighbors to group together? Because I know a lot of neighbors are trying to work together to get their surveys, to get their septic designs, to get their wave uprish reports, to get their geology reports, how are they going to build their seawalls, the sewer septic foundations. But if there is some way, and I know there's privacy laws, so you can't send out people's information, but there should be some sort of, I feel like there's some sort of concerted effort that the city could help make. And if people want to come to another meeting regarding that, I just don't know how, but the organization has to come from within. And I feel when we come to these meetings, this board of engineers is great. And they, everyone says we just carry out the council's orders. We just carry out the council's orders. And then we talk to the council and they're kind of wondering what to do. And then they direct you and Joe to carry out their orders. And we're as a community, I think the community is figuring out, how does this government work? How do we get these things to be carried out?
So this is a broader issue. Tonight we are here to talk specifically about rebuild technical questions, as we have in all the community meetings, but specific to beachfront and neighborhood communities. If we want to have a separate conversation about how city council manager form of government works, we can absolutely do that. I'm not going to monopolize the time here. I want to make sure that our building professionals and residents are able to answer those questions. As far as direction from the council is the budgetary and policy making governing body, right? If you're familiar with private sector, you have a board of directors, you have a CEO, which is essentially your city manager, and you have a COO, which is your assistant or deputy city manager in this case. And that's how we work together. Good governance makes good government. And so we work through a lot of the issues. The council wants to be a part of and is very active in the policy direction when it comes to fire rebuilds. And we are a team in terms of the two lanes. We're operations and administration. They are policy and budgeting, and together we can accomplish a lot. That's on a very basic high level structure of government, folks, and I'm sure that you all can remember that. But as far as answering the questions that you're talking about tonight, that you continue to bring up at all of our community meetings, which are very important, but they should be addressed to the council because those are policy direction, right? Yeah. So we keep having the same conversation. I don't think you like my answer when it's not the rebuilds team or jurisdictional authority to opine on what you're talking about. It's an unfair question for them. We are talking about policy that's in existence. We're talking about how it's applied to beachfront homes. Let's keep the conversation there, and we can chat offline again about what you're talking about on a master planning approach, because that's basically what it is. And you and I have had that conversation. So I'm going to move over here to our next question. If you have any final comments, please do so. Keep it brief.
Yeah, I mean, we're here for the beaches. The issue is money and people being able to afford to rebuild. And so, again, how do we form as a group in a community for over 300 beach homeowners to work together for economies of scale, for a group seawall, group foundation, group sewer? And I feel that question, I've asked it over and over again to council, to planning commission. I'm here at every meeting. And it's the city, the residents don't really know. It's a very complicated process. They're here to get answers. These technical answers even go over the architect's head because, frankly, it's
Chris, we're going back into it. So I'm sorry. I'm going to cut you off. We're going to go over here to the next question. I appreciate it. And it's not that it's not a priority, but it is a conversation that needs to happen in the format of making a public comment to the city council. The city council has a conversation. They have consensus. If there's a quorum of consensus, which means it's 3 or more, then we as the administrative team are provided direction, and then we go forth and execute. We haven't received that direction yet. So again, let's bring it back to here. I want to make sure that we are focused on the questions. Reg, I'm going to punt over to you.
Reg Brown, Pacific Engineering Group, Coastal Engineering. I have 4 questions. Some of them will come up just because of some of the questions that were answered or asked earlier today. I've been getting a lot of calls from property owners asking if they could possibly save money by using or reusing their existing septic system. A lot of times this existing septic system is farther seaward than it needs to be. keep in mind that when you build a seawall, these seawalls are going to cost anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 a linear foot. The closer you get to the ocean, the farther away from Pacific Coast Highway, the more expensive this seawall is going to be. Just when you come back, for every foot away from the ocean, closer to Pacific Coast Highway, your 2 return walls get 1 foot shorter. So for every foot, you're looking at a savings of $16,000 in the construction costs of that seawall. So a lot of times these people are saying, well, I want to save my leach field because I want to save $25,000. Well, if they actually move that leach field landward more, they could probably actually save $100,000 in the building of that seawall. So I want the homeowners to understand, work with your coastal engineers, work with your architects, work with your design team to come out with a really good economic solution to your problem. A lot of times it's, well, I want to save this. Well, saving, $25,000 may cost you $100,000 in the construction costs later on. So I wanted to bring that up. But there was a question that was brought up to Lauren, and that had to be with beach nourishment. And the beaches in Malibu get their sand from the Santa Monica Mountains. And there is a silver lining to these fires. And that is when the fires burn the watershed, a lot of times we have heavy rains after those fires. And those rains bring down a lot of sediment out of the mountains. And in the summer that comes after the fires and the rains, we generally end up with a lot of sand on the beach. So that's something that we have to and the city council needs to keep track of, because we have the state, Caltrans usually, I noticed this with Las Flores Creek, with the flooding of Las Flores Creek right after the fires, they were trucking the debris and the soil to landfills. That stuff should really go into the ocean. Now, I know it looks bad dumping sand and gravel into the ocean, but that's where it goes. If we continue to intercept the sand source that provides sand on the beaches in Malibu, we will have eroding beaches more and more. Okay, and this question, I know we have a couple of city council members sitting in the audience today. I want them to be aware of this situation. The question I have for Jorge is, when you have a garage, and it's a detached garage, but it's in a V zone, a 1-story detached garage in a V zone, it's a non-habitable structure. Does that have to conform to the lowest horizontal structural member in the V zone, since it's non-habitable?
Yes, it does. Now, one of the questions that has come up has been, does it really have to be structurally detached from the main residence? And that's a conversation I've been having with FEMA the last few weeks. We're working to make sure, as Don said it, not all lots are created equal. It really depends. There's a lot of constraints, right? Your lot can change. The VE zone line can sort of cut through just portion of the property. So maybe we can work together on coming up with a design that pushes the garage out of the VE zone. So it's really hard to give you an answer without really looking at a set of plans. But in general, we can definitely try to come up with a solution, whether it does have to be structurally detached or not. Maybe the slab can be frangible, it can break away. There's certain design components, technical components that come into play, but without really having a design, it's sort of hard to give you an answer that will fit for every property. But yes, the answer would be it still has to meet the lowest BFE member, or the lowest. It has to be at the lowest BFE. Yeah.
Because in the burn area, particularly, which would be basically east of Carbon Beach. We have sections of Pacific Coast Highway that are extremely low, particularly on the west portion of La Costa Beach. Got a PCH elevation of about 16 and a half, a top of curb at elevation 17, but then the lowest horizontal structural member has to be at 19. So that's 2 feet above basically the sidewalk. So it's tough to get a car into that area. So we're looking for these options where we can detach a garage from the structure, and that way we can therefore lower the floor of the garage and get our Ferraris in or whatever. All right. So I'm glad you're thinking about that.
Yeah,
That's a big situation.
Yeah, and we can touch base after, because I've been dealing with FEMA almost on a daily basis. So there's any questions that come up. There's always new questions that relate to the FEMA flood zone, right? So we can always work with FEMA together as well, right? We can always work together. If I don't have the answer, I can find it for you, and we can move forward like that.
Okay, thank you.
Real quick, Reg, so sorry, Reg, before you ask that last question, just
Yes.
want to do a quick time check for everybody. We've had about 15 minutes left for our in-person questions. So remember, we have some for our virtual participants. So sorry with that, Reg.
Last question for Tyler. Didn't want you to fall asleep on me there, bud. So, real fast, this 6 years that you're talking about, this 6 year, does it have an absolute drop dead date? Is it 6 years from the fire? Is it 6 years? What's the date?
Correct. Yeah, 6 years from the fire, so January 7th of, what's the math on that? 2030.
Okay.
No, 2031. 2031.
Okay. That's what I needed to know, because sometimes, we got a lot of people that wait until the last minute to do everything. And so I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that that was the date. So
I should also say that it's 6 years to get your planning entitlement, and you have 8 years to get your building permits. So even if you wait to the very end and you got your planning entitlement before that 6 year mark, you have another 2 years to get your building permit and keep that project active.
Carl?
I think there was someone on that side.
Thank you. So, Carl Randall, Los Flores Beach resident. We had about 40 homes on the beach burn, and most of them had one continuous seawall. And I'm just trying to get my head around understanding all the things we're going to have to build as I try to figure out if we have enough money to do it. My understanding as of this morning is we will be repairing our seawall that's been there since 1983 from David Weiss, put it in, designed it, highly functional for a long stretch. We'll be repairing that. I'm understanding now I will be putting a second seawall behind that to protect my septic system. Is that correct? And beyond that, I will be putting a retaining wall for PCH. Is my understanding correct? There's actually 3 different pieces I'm going to have to do?
So I haven't seen a structural evaluation or any as-built for your seawall yet. And I understand I've talked to a number of you, and think including Paula was one of them,
Yes.
right? And I think I also talked to, is it Sam Marshall?
Yes.
Is working, right. So I've had several meetings with Sam and several discussions. And in one of those discussions, we talked about a second wall if the first one was not structurally sound and could not be raised high enough to protect your on-site wastewater treatment system, if it couldn't be modified. So I wouldn't say that there are 3 walls, but there are 3 changes in elevation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you may have to accommodate, right? One is the structural support of PCH, but more importantly, the backside of the homes that are along PCH, right? And exactly what does that border look like? Normally, from a geotechnical perspective, if the wall is on your property and it's holding up a neighbor's property, then you're responsible for that wall. Same thing, vice versa. If the wall is on the neighbor's property, right, they're responsible for that wall. That Caltrans whole situation, I don't know about that, right? That's a big question.
That's a big issue.
That is a big issue, and I would agree that is a big issue.
So go and let you finish,
and
please.
so then with respect to the seawalls, have you guys hired a structural? I haven't seen anything yet.
No,
so I don't.
We've
I
been
don't,
kind of waiting on what you were talking about, the data you've got coming out later this week for Sam Marshall to get to work on a variety of these things so we can figure out where the BFE is, et cetera. But
well, no, you guys already have the base flood elevations. All the
Okay.
base flood elevations, they're already existing. I mean, those are maps you can see, and we've provided that information. Yeah, it's on the website. So,
Okay.
so he shouldn't be waiting on that.
he said he was waiting for some data. At least this was last week.
Okay.
I haven't spoken to him in a couple
Well,
days.
I'll check back in with him tomorrow then, and we'll make sure that whatever he's waiting on, if it's something we can provide him, we'll get that to him.
My data could be old. But just remember, so that wall that we have out there from 1983, for us to get the right to build that wall in 83, we had to give the Coastal Commission an amenity. So
Completely understand.
all I can tell you is that people who live there, the 40 people, will fight in tooth and nail to keep that. So will we have one wall out front, we'll have another wall behind, and then we're going to have a retaining wall.
That was what you just said.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, so
I don't know. It depends on, is your wall deep enough? Is it high enough? Because where
my
is it going
assumption
to
is it
end
won't
up?
be high enough because it was built 40-something years ago.
Right. So can you modify it?
Mm-hmm.
Or can you rebuild a wall immediately behind it? That's something to discuss with planning. I mean, here's the thing. Probably for something of this magnitude, I would recommend that you get Sam to come in. I don't know how many people, but we would need something specific, and we would need to know. And probably your first place to start would be to get an as-built of your existing wall and a structural evaluation compared to current code. That would be the first place to start. And then when you have an idea of whether that could be modified or whether it would need to be rebuilt but higher, then you could come in and talk about elevations with the building official. I think the lead planner, I think this is kind of one of those big projects where you need multi-departments and you probably need a few meetings, with the high-level decision makers who, if there was some kind of exception or special circumstance that needed to be considered, they would have the ability to decide that. So I wouldn't just assume that you're going to have to do 3 walls, but you've always had at least 2 walls. You just never had to deal with them before and didn't think about them.
I did, but many of my neighbors only had one. They had the seawall out front, and PCH just sloped into the back of their house, so they had one.
Okay.
That's the vast majority too.
Okay.
So there was one piece there.
Right.
But I also think about, my wall was barely damaged. My next door neighbor's was basically not damaged at all. Her house is the concrete house that still exists there. What is she going to be through, because she has a septic system behind there with their seawall, but she obviously burned on the inside, and the fire department was inside. What is she going to be faced with? Is she going to have to put another wall behind as well? And how we're all tied together, so each one of these impacts each other.
And so this has to be a bigger conversation and with your design team, so we can work together towards solutions.
Great.
I understand having 40 properties together working, moving forward. It's just different than just a single parcel.
Yeah.
So maybe we can set up something for this week or next week.
Great.
Who's your design professional that we can contact?
Sam Marshall is doing 6 or 8
That's
houses
Sam.
on the beach
Okay.
at least.
Okay.
Of the
And,
stretch, but there's several others involved in the
okay.
process.
And so maybe we'll have a group of the design team coming in and try to tackle that. I don't think there is need to be a way to have geotechnical guidelines or coastal. There's other things that we need to start talking about and having giving you solutions. And
Yeah, I think Sam already has a pretty darn good idea what we're running into, but I'm worried about costs as a homeowner. And if I've got 3 pieces to build, and if I'm hearing Reg at $10,000 a linear foot, that's a lot.
And I prefer that we have the conversation. I know Sam might have the answers for you. I just want to make sure that we're vetting it through the team and we are giving you a more concrete answer, and that way that estimates on your materials and because now time is money.
Yeah. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Okay, I just have one other question. So Jorge, we have a couple of different projects and our garage is below the BFE. And I thought at one of these other design professional sort of meetings that we were told that the garage could be below the BFE, because how are you going to get into the garage? and that as long as you had sort of vents in the wall, that would be allowed. But then I heard you say to Reg just before that the garage could not be in the BFE.
So let me just kind of clarify. I think, and I remember your question from a few meetings ago.
Correct.
I'm working with FEMA on this question because a lot of people have been asking, well, what am I going to do? You know, my property went up by 9 feet. How am I going to get to my garage? Right. So there's scenarios where it's just not feasible and where FEMA could be okay with the garage being below the BFE as long as there's flood vents, all the utilities are above the BFE. But again, when I speak on this, I'm generally speaking, right? It's really hard to give you an answer without looking at a set of plans, without looking at the BFE, without looking at where the VE cuts on your property. Does it clip the property or is it entirely engulfed on the property? Does it go to PCH?
It's basically a half.
Right. So at that point,
actually less.
Yeah. See, so at that point, that's where you and I can work together. I can send these emails or plans to FEMA, and we can say, look, this is the survey. This is where the property's at. Do you have any ideas? Do you have any suggestions? How can we go about this? But in general, if you look at FEMA Technical Bulletin 5, does talk about having certain components below the BFE, right? Accessory structures that are less than 100 square feet, things like that. So it just kind of depends on your design and your proposed floor plan.
Yeah, I saw some of those FEMA guidelines, but there was one where it showed a garage and it showed the slab as just like all cracking in a flood. Well, that's not really practical in earthquake zoned areas that water could just crack your slab. Like, how's it going to work? Especially if you have a leach field under there.
Yeah. So are you referring to having the slab breaking away or what do you
Correct,
mean?
yeah.
Yeah. And they do talk about that. They do talk about having the slab frangible or breaking away so it doesn't affect the property above, right? Your first floor. So it just kind of depends. Is the first floor directly above the garage? There's different design components. It's not a one size fits all. So whatever works for you may not work for another property owner in the VE zone.
And then also you brought up the main electrical switchboard or panel is usually on the side of the garage. Where is that going to be located? Because
well, I can't tell you where it's going to be located, but it has to be above the BFE. Above the base flood elevation. All utilities have to be above the base flood elevation.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Jefferson, you told me less than a minute. You're up.
Hi, Jefferson Wagner, former council member here in the city of Malibu. Lost my home in the Woolsey fire, rebuilding now. Local contractors, local evaluators, local expediters, wonderful. I have a message from Liam. He's also known as William Bigelow. He's the orchestrator for all of the leases for the properties for the rebuild. He leased from the city where you see the trucks all parking now and all that equipment. He has for free 17,000 cubic yards of certified EPA clean roadbed for anybody who wants it. 17,000 cubic yards. So that's a lot of material. It's free, it's cleaned, it's certified, it's got the EPA stamp on one side and the, who's the other guy on the other side? FEMA. So that asset is there for all of you contractors, builders, and Reg and the rest of you. It's there, it's free, claim it. Thank you. It was a minute and a half.
Thank you, Jefferson. I'm going to come over here to Marissa, and I see, just to let everyone know quickly on time, we've got time for those that are still in line, so we have 3 in person, and then we are going to switch over to our virtual.
Hi, Marissa Coughlin. Regarding Public Works comment about the VE zone and the base flood elevation, in the coastal zone in the recent, 15 years or so, they have been doing the VE zone, as you said, all the utilities had to be up then, but they could have the detached garage. But then we came into ADA noncompliance too. So you have to keep thinking of the detached garage and if the house is above the base flood elevation. So that's something. Also, can some of you please tell Caltrans about the storm drains? On one of my projects, I kept telling them there was a storm drain under the house. They said, no, the house is burned. Oops, there's a storm drain. Most of the storm drains they have not been maintained. They're rotten. They have holes in them, so they're dysfunctional. And they also allow, because they don't put mesh covers on them, the homeless people go down on them to go into the houses. PCH regarding Caltrans participation and possible funding. As you know, the State Coastal Act determines the PCH is a public view scenic corridor. And if they want the public to enjoy it, I think they need to participate in the rebuilding, maintenance and support of it. The bulkhead issue landward, I'm finishing one now. I'm waiting for the State Lands Commission on determination. Tyler's familiar with it. It's down by Topanga. But if you put a bulkhead behind an existing bulkhead, and Greg Harris did a great job on building it, the state land still wanted to provide a determination, and that has been going on since 16. And that's the only thing left, the homeowners living there and everything else. My final comment is the bulkhead, yeah. So Tyler, maybe you can make sure that state lands won't have to do a determination letter if that's decided. The storm drain locations, the homeless, and the Caltrans participation and supporting the highway. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, right over here.
Hi, Leslie, beachfront homeowner for 3 homes. I've got a question, and my apologies as I'm new to all this. What is the requirements for the uprush study, and why would that be needed if my seawall is not compromised and in good shape and meets all the requirements? And where can I obtain that information?
Okay, so the requirement is not for the house. The requirement is for the on-site wastewater treatment system. Okay, so your seawall is intact. You've had it structurally evaluated. Okay, your system is intact.
Yes, ma'am.
That's an unusual. Are you an advanced system already? Is it a relatively new? I guess it just
Less
depends.
than 10 years.
I'm sorry?
Less than 10 years.
Less than 10 years.
I've got
So-
2 out of 3 properties with it in the right location, back against Pacific Coast Highway.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I'm having trouble hearing you.
My apologies. I've been on site phase 2, and I was also shut down for Caltrans today and delayed because of Caltrans, as everyone else is. But I've got 2 out of the 3 homes that we're redoing, and 2 of the septic systems are located in the rear of the properties behind the seawalls closest to Pacific Coast Highway. They've been inspected. The caps are off on one of them. I've already called, and I understand that was one of my other questions why I'm leading into this, from uprush to seawall to septic system.
Okay, so typically you would need an uprush study if you needed a new seawall and you were putting in a new system to demonstrate that it was going to be properly protected. If you are not touching either one of those, then maybe you don't need a coastal engineering study because you're just doing the house, right?
Perfect, thank you. And again, neighbors have asked to go in.
But this is the first time I've heard of that. So here's what I would like to do, because I don't think I've spoken to you yet. Have you come in?
No, I just got on a plane and arrived here a couple days ago.
Okay. And forgive me, I forget. I tend to think of most everybody as being local, and I know, people live elsewhere, or they're taking care of their parents' homes, and I've been in that position too. So I apologize for assuming that, of course, you would be somewhere local. So I would love to speak to you. We can set up a Zoom meeting. We can look at the particulars,
sure,
and come to some formal conclusion like that. But theoretically, based on what you're telling me, I don't know that a coastal engineering study is required.
Fantastic. Then regarding the rebuild, I have a in-sound on one particular property, structurally sound seawall per the requirements, untouched. Amen. However, I don't have beach access. I don't have a stairwell. So part of my rebuild on this property will be requesting beach stairwell access. It might mean me actually having to change my seawall. I haven't made that decision, but I'm exploring all my options. How is that going to be handled? Is that going to have to be going through coastal if I change the seawall, or does that get all grandfathered in with all of this?
No, the way that planning worked it out, and then Jorge, I'm going to let planning and public works talk about that. First, we want to know when your seawall was built, because just because it's intact doesn't mean it's going to be sufficient to protect your system for a brand new home, right? Or a rebuilt home, right? Which is going to be there a lot longer. And the one thing I will say is right now, what did get held in abeyance is your determination of mean high tide line, right? And so if your wall should be rebuilt, but it doesn't get rebuilt under your fire rebuild entitlement, then it becomes a CDP, and then I don't know where things go from there.
Fair
Maybe
enough.
later, 10 years down the road. But at any rate,
I'll touch on the stairs. Yes, you can do stairs, whether you attach them to the seawall, however you design that. One thing to know is when you do designs, and I'm sure Reg has done millions of these, is whether they break away, they're retractable, or they remain in place. Those would be the design requirements on stairs within the FEMA flood zone.
So just to be clear, if I wanted to run another seawall back to PCH and cut into mine and build stairs out of concrete all the way back with a walkway, that would not be allowed. Is that correct?
So the stairs in the flood zone in general are allowed.
Okay.
In the flood zone. How you propose?
That's okay. I'll bring that to planning. That's no problem.
I do want to just address something from the planning perspective. So if you've never had stairs before, it depends how you design them. One thing, and this is to Marissa's point, and I wanted to say about that, is you can't go further seaward. So if your seawall is established a certain line in the sand, your building's established a certain line in the sand, you cannot project further seaward. If you can somehow design the staircase within your footprint of your home, and the architects get pretty crafty with it, it is possible. But in terms of your seawall, we're probably only going to allow a new seawall if it's required or recommended by your coastal engineer, not just to go and do one. So if you have an existing one that works and meets the requirements to protect your OWTS, we might not just gift you one, but if you need it per their recommendations, then it could happen.
Well, I'd like it, but I'll come visit you on that one. Thank you. My last question is regarding septic systems. So today they opened up the septic system. It's already been inspected prior to, and walking along the beach on Las Tunas Beach, I noticed that all these septic systems are sitting open on the sand. And the water is flooding in because since I left in January, there's around 5 feet more of sand. And I can now touch the top of my seawall, which in 7 years I was never able to. So my question is, and I've already called the people to come and have it pumped and capped because we're done. Is that something that you guys are going to handle? I keep hearing different things. Can you please comment on that? And
Yes,
that's it.
And thank you for bringing this question. We have 70 properties that have opt out. So we have a better way to manage those properties. We are having a pre-construction meeting prior to the debris removal of those properties, and what we're doing is one of the conditions of cleaning those parcels is pumping those systems. So we know what those 70 properties are gonna happen, and we're keeping a tab on that. What are we doing regarding the ones that have decided to opt in and Army Corps of Engineers is not pumping? We are sending, we have started sending letters, and also I'm also receiving calls from different of our pumpers companies that they have encountered that some of those systems have been damaged. So we have actually issued 3 permits for an abandonment of septic systems at the beachfront properties. And so we're keeping a very close eye on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And Don, you're about to close us out on our in-person questions. We still have a few on for our virtual participants, and we'll take it. Oh, Tyler has a comment.
Real quick, because Marissa brought up a good point about state lands, and it's very important for you beachfront homeowners. We worked it out with the state. So again, drawing those lines in the sand, your building cannot project further seaward, your deck cannot project further seaward, but you're allowed to build back what you had to that extent on the beach without a state lands letter. Just want to make sure that's clear. Now, if you do more than 10% and you want to do a whole new design, coastal development permit, then the process does require a state lands letter. We have to determine where the state lands are compared to the private property, and that is a lengthy process. So if you do rebuild plus 10%, you don't need state lands. If you do a CDP more than 10%, you will need a state lands.
Don Schmitz again. Sorry, I had to come back because I just got alerted to something. And Yolanda, you really need to be aware of this, and perhaps Chief Diwali. A big concern that I had for all of the beach homes on the rebuild was the fire flows and the check valve problem there at Topanga Canyon and Pacific Coast Highway. I wrote letters to the water district, and the good news was that they've decided to just proactively grab that and take care of it and rebuild the check valve. And so they're moving forward on that, as opposed to making everybody's will serve letters conditional and all the nightmare in regards to contributions and such as far as that goes. However, I've just been informed that Water District 29 is now stating that they will not give the will serve letters until the contractor gets the job and they know what the timeline is, which, as we all know, these things can take a long time, which could be a real processing problem. I just found out about this, so I don't expect you to know about it, but there's got to be some sort of solution. Perhaps you could intercede on that, or you could assure these people that they'll still be allowed to proceed without the traditional will serve letter.
And thank you for bringing this to our conversation. And you said you just heard it from one of your associates that met with the Water District 29?
Yes.
Okay, we will follow up, and Chief Diwali can attest to this. There have been a lot of conversation with the fire department, also with Water District 29. The reassurance, not only from the county supervisor's office, or city council, or city manager's office, it's helping our families rebuild, and that's the commitment. So I don't want to say rumors. I just want to make sure that we are that we set the expectations, and we're gonna and helping those families. So just hold on into that, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. So just
It's Carolyn Hernandez at Water District 29.
okay.
I want to talk to you.
We
about
will
this.
follow up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. So we are going to switch over to our virtual participants here.
My house has a shared wall with another. If the neighbor does not rebuild, how much space do I need between the lots?
It's possibly they're possibly talking about a duplex, a triplex. We had a lot of properties built in the 1960s, 1950s that used to share a common wall. Do you want to speak on the seismic separation requirements under the structural standards?
So the big thing with that is going to be seismic separation. So depending upon what they're proposing to build, they'll actually have to determine the deflection of the building and provide ample gap between their property line and the potential of the adjacent parcel rebuilding, so that the two buildings do not collide in a seismic event. So yeah, I'm assuming that that's what they're trying to determine. But yeah, they'll have to work with their consultants to determine what the seismic separation between the two would be.
And the usual seismic separation is about?
It's usually an inch, inch and a half. It just depends.
Not significant.
Yeah, it depends on the weight of the structure, the height of the structure. Yeah, and what they're using as a lateral system. Say they're using concrete shear walls or something along those lines, is less deflection in the building. So that will result in less of a space or a gap. So yeah.
Can staff explain how the string line setbacks will be applied?
I don't. I know beachfront homeowners and beachfront developers or designers in Malibu get used to the term string line because Malibu uses the term string line in their code. I kind of want you to forget about that for the rebuild because string line by definition is tied to your two neighbors. So, your neighbor has a deck here, your neighbor has a deck here, and then you draw a line, and that's where you're able to go out to. Remember, this is a rebuild plus 10%, and you're not allowed to go further seaward. So it depends on where your specific property is. That line of your home, that line of your deck, you cannot go further seaward. So that's why I just don't want you guys to focus on string line, because string line gives you the idea that if you have the room based on your neighbors, you can do it. You can't. You cannot go further seaward. So just think about where you are in the sand, both your building and your deck.
And Tyler, if they were to do so, it would take you out of the rebuild, correct? It would trigger a CDP.
Possibly, yes, and it violates our agreements we have with the state, and we don't want to trigger the state lands issue.
Thank you.
Can the geotechnical team please explain the abandonment of the wood piles that was discussed earlier?
Okay, so I'm going to interpret that question to be, what is the difference between leaving them in place or taking them out? So I've drilled, not myself personally, but I have inspected the drilling of thousands of piles. And typically when you leave concrete piles in, unless you're going to core through them very slowly, you're going to avoid them by setting your new piles somewhere next to them so that they don't interfere in your drilling. Timber tends to be very soft, especially if it's been soaking in the water for a long time. So we drill through wood all the time. It's actually pretty common. If you're going to be drilling to put new concrete piles in and you've got timber piles already in place, if the contractor doesn't yank them out of the ground because they're not going to go into bedrock, they typically have been vibrated in place or beat into the sand. You can pull those out. If they won't come out, the auger or the core bucket, when you start drilling, will just drill right through them. So they're not strictly a problem with respect to debris, unless you're yanking them out and then you need to abandon them because they're part of the regular debris, the additional debris that the Colonel was talking about earlier. So I hope that answers the question.
What if a neighbor wants to buy my property to add a pool or a garden instead of a structure? Is there a restriction on doing that?
There are restrictions on uses. You have the ability to rebuild a home plus 10% if you choose not to do that. There are limitations on what you can do with the vacant lot. Minimal plantings, may not even need a permit, but you can't have accessory structures. For example, you can't put a driveway on your property without a primary use. So if you do not reestablish the primary use on your property, which is the single family residence, there are a number of limitations to your property. It's basically supposed to be open space. You can do some fencing, but other than that, there's not much you can do. Or you can join the lots together, which would be a CDP.
Is anyone from the planning department writing down the list of the common discretionary and policy interpretation questions from the projects that have already been consulted so that they can create a guide?
Sorry. Yes, but I want to make sure your question gets asked when we go before the council. So send me an email, and we'll put that item on the list.
I think this question may be tied to the previous one, but it says, will the public be able to see and comment on the list of topics for the policy manual prior to it being brought in front of council? And what is the criteria that the planning department is following to assemble the policy manual?
It's envisioning it. It's going to be similar to our current local coastal program policy manual that we have that's available online. So essentially, we go before the council, we establish some of the main issues and how the city is going to interpret those issues or use those issues in policy going forward. A common one is an architect asked about basements. Not really taught for beachfront because you guys have to do the FEMA thing, but basements are exempt from total development square footage. And so one question that we're going to bring to the council is, should basements be allowed and not counted towards your 10%? So things like that. But essentially, it's going to be at a special meeting. We're going to bring all the issues that we've listed so far. And if we have not listed those, you're more than welcome to come to that meeting. It's an open meeting and present your case for your issue that you want addressed.
Thank you. And so that wraps up our Q&A. And thank you so much for that, Tyler. So as Tyler was mentioning in our rebuild, we do have upcoming meetings. Just to kind of put some of those on your radar, our next community meeting will actually be for the Broad, Franklin, and Woolsey fire rebuilds. That will be in here next Tuesday. We'll be having that meeting. We have a special city council meeting in which we will discuss septic/sewer, geotechnical study requirements, and self-certification on April 24th. That's going to start at 2 p.m. I believe it will be here in the council chambers to accommodate the size, but it will still be the same format as the work sessions if you've attended any of those in the MPR. And then we have a regular city council meeting April 28th, where, as Tyler was referring to, a policy document at every regular city council meeting. So the second and fourth Mondays of the month, starting at 5:30 with presentations and whatnot, but public comment starts at 6:30. There will be an item on the council's agenda that says special meeting for fire rebuilds. That is so the council can take a look at that running list that I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of priorities that the council is looking at regarding rebuilds, and that's the opportunity in which they set their future agendas. So the policy document Tyler was referring to, some of the other items that were referred to here tonight, they discuss those generally and then itemize them for future special meetings. So our special fire rebuild meetings with the city council are on alternating Thursdays on a week on a week that there is not a regular city council meeting. So if you're familiar with our schedule, if there's a planning commission meeting, there's a special city council meeting on that Thursday. So clear as mud. Happy to answer any questions for you. And all of this is available on MalibuRebuilds.org. We do try to keep everyone updated with any special meetings, and there may be additional ones depending on the council's priorities. So, but that is the current calendar. So next Tuesday, then next Tuesday, community meeting, rebuild team, but special council meeting, April 24th, regular meeting, April 28th. And with that, Yolanda, I'll let you close us out.
Yeah, and so for us is the second meeting for the community for Beachfront, but it's possibly just the beginning. And if I was to give you an advice, and I'm just talking to the families, your design team is going to be critical moving forward. Even for making a determination if you move forward with rebuilding or not. There is a lot at stake. There's a lot of challenges, and a lot of the technical information that has been shared with you. Sometimes you feel it's a burden. It's a lot. Other times I feel that you're waiting for something to happen so you can start. And I'm talking to all the families. The building code is already established. The regulations for structural standards is already there. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I have a property owner that have hired their design team, that we have reviewed architectural plans, structurals already, and there's components of the home that still need to be brought forward, but hire the correct and the right team that is good for you, that you know that is going to be the team that can take you to the finish line. That is critical. The other thing is the Rebuild Center. The Rebuild Center is there for you. It was created for each one of you. We thought about this for each one of you, from the design team, from the owners, from the contractors, having a group of individuals that be solely concentrated on helping you and moving for you forward. I'm not going to minimize that this is challenging. I'm not going to minimize the frustration, the anger that some of you feel. I am so sorry that we're going through this. I am so sorry that things needed to happen the way they happened. It is one of the worst times in our lives, and I'm putting myself and the team with this just because we're walking this with you. And the city will not leave you behind. And it's not just words, it's the time that we are putting in and committing to for you to come forward and for you to reach out and for us to work together and for us to continue rebuilding Malibu, the Malibu that you love, the Malibu that you live, the Malibu that you want to be, are part of it. So with that, God bless you. Thank you. And let's move forward together.